he had told us that the Lord wanted him off the property by 8 o'clock. And if we weren't off that property by that time, then the evil powers or the government were going to come take his children. Mm-hmm. And so that also is what was told to the mothers. He specifically wanted the birth mothers to hand the children to him. I guess that was some kind of sacrifice that he wanted. Keep in mind, this happened at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were supposed to leave that night at 8.
Oh, my word.
And he told us, pack your stuff, you're never coming back.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Sam.
And I'm Melissa.
I grew up in the FLDS community. It is a polygamous group run by Warren Jeffs, and I moved out when I was 18 years old.
I was raised LDS. Sam and I have been married for 9 years and have 2 awesome kiddos.
Yes, we do. We want to quickly thank our donors, YouTube members, and our patrons over on Patreon. We really do appreciate your love and support.
Yeah, so you're back with part 2 of Amy's story. She was the 13th wife of Warren Jeffs. And if you have not seen her first part of what it was like for her growing up in polygamy, then you can click the link above and check that out. We kind of ended right when you are finding out that you are going to be marrying Warren and right before your wedding. So we will just pick right up where we left off. You had said that, your father had kind of mentioned to Rulon, the prophet at the time, that he felt like you should be married to Warren. Mm-hmm. And you had kind of felt that before. So what were the emotions leading into knowing that you were going to go in a couple days and be married to him?
I think anybody, when they're about to get married, there's a little bit of being scared, excited, not knowing what's going to happen. But, I was taught all my life that to enter into the celestial law was your way to exaltation and getting into heaven. So it was like, this is the next step, and I can't believe I'm doing it, but here I go. And we traveled south, and my wedding dress was made in a couple days. I was under a lot of pressure that everything be done on time and everything happened good. He did call me and ask if he said, would you marry me? Mm-hmm. And I did say yes at the time. The day of the wedding, I had a double wedding with my sister. We were given a specific time that the wedding should happen, and we went up to Uncle Rulon's office, and she went in. I got to go to her wedding, but not all of, his side of the family didn't go into her wedding.
Oh, okay.
And the man that she married, when they walked out, that family didn't come into my wedding. But I think her specifically and her husband sat in at the wedding. So
was she a plural wife or was she a first wife? Or?
Yeah, she was a plural wife.
Plural wife, okay.
As well. We walked in, and Uncle Rulon was sitting up there. We sat in front of him. He did the ceremony. There's a certain thing in the FLDS, I assume maybe the LDS is the same, called the patriarchal grip, that you were to hold your hand a certain way, and then the ceremony was read. I think that can be found in the Doctrine and Covenants.
Yeah, I believe it's the sealing ceremony, from what I understand, is pretty much exactly the same with the LDS and the FLDS.
Mm-hmm. We were married, and then family left. One thing I do regret, my brother that I spoke of that was my father, basically, he was not invited to the wedding. Mm-hmm. And that was sad to me that he didn't get to be there, because he had played such an important role in my life.
So who was at your wedding?
And who got to decide then who was going to be there?
So by that time, it was a lot more minimalized than when I described when my mom got married.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was only direct family that wasn't married.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
With a few little exceptions, because my other brother that had been the teacher up there in Alta Academy with Warren, he got to come to the wedding. But my brother that I had felt like was my father, had been a father role in my life. He didn't get to come.
Do you think that was because of the connection that your brother had with Warren, because they worked together?
I kind of think so.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So But I don't know. I never asked Warren or remember him telling me why. But
And was there any kind of reception, or a lot of times people ask, in a sealing ceremony, especially when it's more quiet and in an office and there's not a lot of people, was there any type of celebration, or was it just now you're another wife? And
So what happened was we had got married up at Uncle Rulin's home, and there was a concrete pathway from Rulin Jeff's home down to Warren's home. And so after the wedding, then he turned to me and he said, I'm going to have to ask you to walk down with the family because it was priesthood meeting weekend, and he had to meet with Father Rulin about whatever was going to be said in priesthood meeting, I guess. So I walked down the path with the ladies and the children, and some of his children already kind of knew me because I had been teaching school, like I mentioned, in his home. Some of the children knew me, so they were holding on to my hands and hanging on my skirt, and we walked down the path and went into his big dining room, and he invited my father's family down there to eat after the wedding. So
Okay.
I guess you can say there was kind of a reception. There was no wedding cake or anything fancy or special like that. It was just come and eat together. And
Okay, so it wasn't like a big celebration or anything. It was just a get together more than anything. So, man, I have so many questions. Because in my eyes, and I know that you had more of a connection with Warren Jeffs and his family specifically, I had some connections with Rulin Jeffs because one of my sisters married Rulin Jeffs when she was about 19 and he was about 80 years old-ish. So, that was interesting, but in my young eyes, I assumed that it was the greatest privilege on this earth to marry the prophet of God, and assumed that she felt the same way, and she never told me otherwise. So it just kind of, and I think she was about his 60th wife. So, Rulin Jeffs had a lot of wives at this point.
yes, he did.
So for you, I know that Warren Jeffs wasn't the prophet yet, but were you nervous, or did you feel like you weren't worthy enough to be a part of this Jeffs family, or did you have enough connections to know that they weren't perfect and they were just other man?
Say I can probably remember feeling like I was a little unworthy. More like so amazed that, I don't know, if you look back on my experiences, and I had that spiritual awakening, you might say, or whatever, as a teenager, I felt like I had been watched over and protected, because there was another side that could have happened. I could have left the church. I could have, whatever, could have happened to me. So I did feel a little unworthy. And then the awkwardness actually set in right after. It was kind of like I said that I had felt like that's where I was supposed to go. But then here I am married to my principal, my teacher, my best friend's dad. It was kind of different. Not kind of, it was just different.
Not to mention you were 17, right?
16.
I was 16.
Sorry, 16.
2 weeks away from 17.
Okay.
So, but I was still
What did your
16.
friend say when she found out, or how did your best friend of childhood find out?
She wasn't comfortable with it. And then it happened again and again. And so after a while, she made the comment, I'm not going to make any more friends because my friends just marry father.
Oh, no.
Oh, I can't even.
But,
Oh, man. It's hard to put into perspective what that even means, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, to think, like you, for example, Melissa, like, imagine...
I don't want
Yeah,
to.
no,
We can
so, yeah,
skip
it's
this.
just-
We can skip this exercise.
it's like, it's just so hard to even comprehend what that would mean, though, for people your age, your friends... and then them marrying your father.
She was kind to me, though. I think toward me anyway, she kept her struggles within. And then after a little while, she's like, okay, I'm getting used to calling you Mother Amy, because that was how it went back then, is when you got into the family, then you were called Mother so-and-so by your name,
Right.
by the different children from the different mothers.
Now that changed, if I'm not mistaken, right? Didn't it used to be different, and then as time went on, it became that you were supposed to call them mother and then their name? Because before, I remember calling my other mothers aunt.
Yes, back when I was younger, I don't really ever remember calling my mom's aunt, but maybe my older siblings did. But it was, and that again may be another one of those things that it was according to the family,
I see.
how the father implemented the rules.
Okay.
But
And
Interesting.
did the age gap between, like, was the age gap between you and Warren something that you thought of before the marriage, or was that something that sunk in after, or?
I didn't even think about it.
Yeah, okay.
It was,
And that's kind of with the culture, right? Like, it
Yeah.
was pretty typical, so it wasn't like an odd thing either.
yeah, I had seen other younger ladies marry older men, and it wasn't different to me. I mean,
Yeah. So, I mean, the idea of it was common at that point, so it wasn't a big deal in your mind because you saw it happening. But were you nervous for yourself? That did it feel? I don't know. Like, did it feel awkward at all?
I guess my thoughts weren't really on I'm marrying this older man. It was just nervousness of going into a new family. I will say I had a hard time speaking to him in person. I could write a letter to him and express anything I wanted to say or my feelings or of what I was going through or whatever. But if I was to stand there in front of him and try to talk to him, I would get shaky. I would get nervous. And it got better through the years, but right at first, that's how it was.
Wow. Can only imagine. Yeah.
So going into his family at the age 16, everybody wonders what was it like in a day in the life of WSJ. So when I got married, it was common for him to call the ladies' rooms in the morning. Good Words was at 6. He would call you in the morning and give you an assignment of what you were on that day. So if I refer to being on somebody, that doesn't mean I was sitting on somebody. That means I was taking care of that group of children that day. Or if you were on kitchen or on laundry or on house, then he had it well structured in that way so that everything was taken care of through the day.
Okay. So the assignments for each mother would be different each day?
Usually, when I first got married, you were usually on the same thing for 3 days.
Okay.
And then he would switch it up. But, there could be one day that it was different. But that's the general way how it was. So there was somebody put on kitchen, somebody put on house. You were responsible to clean the public areas of the house, not everybody's private bedrooms and private bathrooms, but there was the public hallways, the public bathrooms, the laundry areas. There was somebody on laundry, so that person was more responsible for the laundry area. So you'd get a phone call and get told what to do. If you didn't get a phone call, it was written on a calendar. So you'd go down to the kitchen and see what you were put on that day.
What would you say a phone call, like would Warren Jeffs call you personally, or what would that look like?
Yes, all the bedrooms had you could call a number and it would call that direct bedroom.
Oh, I see. It's kind of like a
So-
hotel.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So I could put in whatever number and call this lady's room, and if she was in there. Back then we didn't have the cell phones and the cordless phones yet, so everything was was in your room. So you'd find out your duty. If you were on children, you were responsible to get them ready for the day and have them there at Good Words at 6 o'clock in the morning. All the children were there except for maybe the babies. Even it was at about, I want to say 3 years old, that you were kind of required to have them there. Unless they were sick. There were some exceptions. If somebody was sick or whatever, then it was fine if you weren't there. But so we would have Good Words at 6, and that was a short reading of Uncle Roy's sermon. And he was really good at being sensitive to the children's needs. So if the children were getting all unruly and wiggly and whatever, then he would cut it short and just say, "Okay, mothers, let's take them down to breakfast." So I did learn a lot from him of how to be sensitive to children's needs. I just watched him and noticed that that's what he did. And then I would try to do the same because he was very good at it.
Yeah. Do you think he was trying to be extra good, extra kind, and things like that to, I guess, show an example of what he expected of his wives? Or do you think that, I guess my question
just
is,
his nature?
Yeah, because I hear stories of how he became and things he did, and I wonder if when he was in public, if he tried to act a certain way to put on this persona, and then behind closed doors and when people weren't watching, was he a completely different person?
I feel like, I mean, what I remember, and please remember all these memories are my mindset of the time.
Right.
So like he would say things like, people think I'm a purple pulpit person, and that they only see me for standing behind the pulpit and preaching. But in his home life, he could be a very loving, kind dad and play with the children and have a good time.
Interesting.
So, and this is what I saw when I was there.
Yeah.
This isn't speaking of what had happened in the past. So
Right. We know that everyone has a different story.
yeah.
Yes.
So this is what I see. So after good words, we would go down to breakfast, and in that huge dining room, if any of y'all are familiar with the
Yes.
the Dream Center.
This was in the Dream Center house?
Yeah, so we
Okay.
lived, when I got married, we lived in the Dream Center, and that, where now is the TV room, that was our dining room back then.
Okay.
And it had 2 or 3 or 4, I can't remember, huge, big, long tables. So we would go in there and eat breakfast. And then it was everybody, be about your day, whatever you were assigned to. If you were on kitchen, you were responsible to clean up the kitchen. If you were on laundry, you'd head down if you were on a group of children, you'd have to take the kids down and do laundry. Sometimes I was put on his big boys, and we would do things like go to the zoo and clean out the pens, wash cars, fix bikes. He tried to have his children busy. And I want to say it was a good busy. It wasn't at least me as a caretaker of the children, I tried to make it that way and be sensitive to their needs. If the children were done doing a job and it was just more of a hassle to try to keep their focus, then we just stopped and went and had a break. And back then we had toys, we had games, they got to go outside and play. So you would be about your job. Lunchtime was specifically always, at noon. And then we had dinner at 5. And then we always had what was called story and song at 6. And the different mothers on the children would, according to their age level, would sit them down and tell them a story, kind of like a bedtime story, stories of the Bible, stories of the prophets that we had been taught about in the church, or personal experiences, just whatever, to kind of calm them down. And then prayer time was usually about 7 o'clock. And then bedtime for the kids. And then there was at this time he was doing class at his father's home. And so he would walk up to class and sit with Uncle Rulin and his ladies and read one of Uncle Rulin's sermons. And a lot of the time we would listen in over the intercom.
Wow.
So
this was still in Short Creek at the home there that is now the Dream Center. Mm-hmm. And I'm very familiar with that home. We've been there multiple times to see the Dream Center.
Yes, and we have a video that does a tour of it. If you're wondering the room she's talking about, I'll leave that link above, and you can click and go and see a tour of that, because it is massive.
Yes. So, and I helped with some of the landscaping when they did the addition on that home and the block wall around it. So
something to point out, when I got married, the addition was not there.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, so this was before that.
So it was before the big addition. So that all where that new part was a big lawn. And
Okay.
and then there was a garden and a shed. And that's where we would go out and play soccer. And we had this game called King Ball that somebody had made up. And there was a lot of happy times like that. He would sometimes tell his older girls, after they had a class together or whatever, then he would tell them to choose a mother, and his daughter Rachel would choose me a lot. Hey, Rach. and we would go out and play soccer or something, and it was always father and the girls against the mothers.
Interesting.
And I became the favorite pitcher in when I say soccer, it was base soccer, not goalie soccer.
Like
So.
is that called kickball?
Yeah, when I was younger, it was called kickball.
Okay, that's what I knew it as.
When I went back up to Salt Lake and Alice Academy, then they called it soccer.
So that's funny.
But it was base soccer.
Okay, wow. So there was some good times, and this was all in Shorter Creek. This was before anything. This was before the
Warren was the prophet.
Zion or any of this stuff came about later on. This was before he was the prophet. At that time, was Rulon Jeffs active? Was he up and about?
By this time, not so active. He
Okay.
was. They were going on these drives every day in the afternoon, and he would. Warren would take Uncle Rulon for a drive somewhere, go to a national park or a canyon or somewhere, and all of Uncle Rulon's ladies would go with him, and just have a day of fun. And Father Rulon would sit there and watch people. And as far as I remember, the purpose of that was, he had his stroke, and he wasn't seeing the people as much, and it was just a way of relaxation and healing after his stroke and stuff.
I see.
So, and oftentimes Warren would call down and come down and say, you, and these group of kids come with me today on the drive. And so we would get to go and have an afternoon with him and Uncle Rulon and his ladies.
Nice. About how many children were living in the house at that time? Because you said you were the 13th wife, right? Mm-hmm. So 13 wives. About how many?
I would have to sit down and count them all, but I would say, I want to say upwards of 30, over 30.
So, and this was before the addition on the house, so that would have been pretty cramped, right? Or was there?
Yes. And shortly after I got married, then as the ladies got married, we had to start doubling up ladies.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Two
So
ladies
ladies had
sharing
to
a room.
share a room. Mm-hmm.
And that,
Which
wow.
is kind of
That puts
uncommon in the FLDS.
Yeah, that puts
Yeah.
a whole new level of awkwardness.
Yeah, and that was kind of a big step that he took. And he was respectful of that. He asked all the ladies who would be comfortable sharing a room. I'm getting married again. I don't have a space for it, And so, actually, I think some of the ladies had shared in their different experiences here and there for just a minute, but this was going to be, for a while, because that's all the room we had. And he asked us who would be comfortable, and people would write to him. And actually, I was one of the first ones to have a different lady stay with me that wasn't a sister or somebody that was related so much. It was just two different ladies from different families and backgrounds that moved together in the same room.
Was there a point that the wives were like, we don't have room and you already have 13, that's enough?
No.
And then okay, so I'm going to have to share my room because you need a 14th wife?
No, I'm sorry. I guess I have to speak for myself, and this is where I was the kind of person that was just going with the flow. Whatever you got told to do, you just did it. You'd be happy about it. I'm not going to say I never had jealousies, but I want to say that I probably was sweeter than some of the other ladies about everything. And I've had people tell me that. They say, I remember that you were sweet about everything, and that I was upset because you didn't get more time with him or whatever,
So
I just went with the flow.
Yeah. Were there outward expressions of jealousy by some of the other wives or ladies?
I can't remember.
Okay.
But I would say probably, I'm not going to speak for others, so I guess I'm not going to say that.
Okay.
But
I only ask that because I wasn't sure if they would have the nerve to show that type of expression.
I do remember one time when he said, ladies, if you're having any jealousies toward a sister wife, I want you to do something for them. And I do remember that time one of the ladies coming to me and kind of confessing to me that she had jealous feelings towards me. And I I can't remember the details. I probably just gave her a hug and said, I love you, No hard feelings. I love you still, or whatever. But I do remember at that time me having, there was one lady in particular, and I went and printed out a picture of me and her and put it in a photo frame and gave it to her and just tried to do something that was, but I will say here, I was more of I would watch some of the reactions of some of the ladies, and I could see that, so to speak, they were like throwing a little fit because they didn't get this or didn't get that. And I was more, my thoughts were more like, that's embarrassing to me to act like that. I would rather be somebody that he trusted and that knew he could depend on and be sweet. And so I would just try to be sweet, versus, but I did see that and recognize it. And I was like, this is kind of just a funny little story, but I remember one lady that was with him a lot. One day he had her take over some children, and he had somebody else come in his room, and she was standing there with that look on her face like she wasn't too happy about that. And I just remember smiling, and to myself I said, join the club, dearie. We don't all get all the time that we want with him.
Wow.
Was it hard to form, I mean, obviously, so before you get married, he's your principal, so you know him, but you don't have that like close personal relationship. And then you get married and you have to go down to the house and he doesn't even come with you. Was it hard to build a personal relationship being the 13th wife and already having his attention spread? What was that like to try to build a personal relationship with your new spouse?
Yes, so that's a very good question, and that actually plays an important role in my story. This gets a little personal here, but I feel like I don't want to get too detailed, but it's very important to point out. So it was very awkward. He would say to us, like, it's your responsibility to get close to me. And so getting close, I was always in question, like, what does that mean? How do I do that? Yeah. And the first night we were married, I was sent to my room, and I slept in my room the first night. It wasn't for a little while later before I was actually with him and then even intimate with him. But the first time I was intimate with him, I was 17. So if y'all can imagine a 17-year-old that had been taught all her life, you don't have sex, you don't do this until you get married. And I knew nothing about it. I had no sex education. I hardly even knew much about when a girl's body changes. I just knew that happened, but I didn't know. I did know that it took a man and a woman to make a child, but anyway. So I was very green to all that. But the first time we were intimate, after he said, let me know if you're pregnant. And it surprised me and kind of scared me as a 17-year-old. And I said, I better not be pregnant. And that I didn't realize, but that offended him very much. And then after that, I had nothing for 6 months.
Oh, wow.
And it got to the point where I was so confused, I didn't know what I had done wrong or what to do to fix it. So it was hard to get close to him and have a wifey relationship with him for a little while for me. I finally went to him after 6 months because I can't remember I know we had these little mother meetings here and there, but somewhere in my mind, I thought that you were supposed to ask to get to have a child. So I went to him after 6 months and I said, I want to have a baby, and he's basically, in that conversation, all I can remember from that is he basically told me that I needed to lose weight. I do remember him, and after that happened, and I point this out because in the interview you did with Elise Stockstater, when she brought up the story about the clock and that public shaming, when I first heard that, I said, Warren wouldn't do that. And then I said, wait a minute, Amy, he did that to you. And after I had said that, publicly he would say to people, you're the one that didn't want to have children. And he would say that in front of other ladies. And it got to the point where I would say, that's not what I meant. Because it wasn't. It was just I was 17 years old. It's what came out. Another thing I remember him calling me was saying that I was pleasingly plump. And so these are things that are said to you as a teenager. And I just didn't know how this was all supposed to work. I was just kind of felt lost for a long time. So we'll kind of put that story on hold, and later we'll find out the rest about what became of all that. But
I'm so sorry. I wish I had like something more to say, but I cannot even imagine. I mean, to go through something like that. I mean, it's just such a unique experience. I don't even know how to begin to understand it, but I can understand how cruel that is.
Yes. And I remember, like, he would say little things like, when are you going to like me again? And when are you going to get close to me? And so I remember this one time walking up the path with him, and he said that to me. And I said, I finally spit out something. I had held it in, trying to just figure this out, because he always said it's your job. So I was always looking at me saying, where do I need to do better? Where am I doing wrong? And I turned to him and I said, Warren, I like you. I want to be with you. What do you want me to do? I'm always with your children. Because that was what became my duty, was always being on the children. And to that, he just, all I can remember is that he looked at me and said, thank you for being at your duty. And so, yes, we definitely had, for me, I know other ladies, then it got to where I started to notice some of the ladies would get married, and it was just like this natural thing. And other ladies were getting pregnant and having children, and I had to work with myself sometimes, my inward feelings, to just hope that one day I would be good enough to have a child. And I do remember one of the other ladies telling me, she kind of felt sorry for me, and she asked Warren herself, can I pray for another sister wife to get pregnant? And he's like, sure. Well, who do you have in mind? And one was her blood sister that had got married with at the same time as she did. And then one was me. And then along the same line, as time went on, I remember when one of the other ladies got married or got pregnant. That also became something that he had me do a lot, was when the ladies got pregnant, he would call me and say, she's 2 now instead of 1. Help take care of her, get her the food she needs, watch out for her, you know. And so when this specific lady got pregnant, then he called me, told me she was pregnant, and he says, and I've heard that, this was a few years later, but he said, I heard that you want to get pregnant. And I said, well, yeah, I do. And he said, all he said was, well, you better get busy.
You better get bit. What does that even mean?
All I could understand that, I mean, what I became of that at that time was that, here again, it was my fault. And I've got to do something. I've got to be good enough. I've got to be obedient enough. I've got to be whatever it was, submissive enough. Even me, I was lost. And I will say, like I said, I had a hard time going to him and saying, so I did not go to him and say, hey, Warren, what is going on here? I don't understand. I had a hard time doing that. I just kept all of this kind of inside.
Yeah.
And so I guess if he could argue with me, he would say, well, you didn't come and ask anything. But he never came to me and said, I'm sorry for what I said. Let's try to have children. You know, there was no communication and understanding. And if he's, you know, this loving, inspired priesthood man, where was that in this experience? You know?
So it sounds like maybe he expected you to do all of the, but it sounds like maybe he wanted you to come begging.
Yeah, but then he would sit there and say, we couldn't play hard to get. If we
Does that feel like rejection to him, right?
Yeah, if we threw a fit or whatever, then he wouldn't pay the time of day to you, at least to me. But he could do that to me, and what was left for me to do was basically come begging for,
Right.
you know.
Wow, man. What a...
And then I watched that happen to other ladies as well. So then also what became, so did it ever heal? Did it change? So my relationship with him became like, as he got new wives, he would say, I think he saw in me that I had the gift of loving people. Ladies were comfortable around me. The children were comfortable around me. You know, I had a good relationship with almost all of them. I love all of them dearly. But he would have the new ladies live with me, and he would say things like, help them get close. And so I would do things like help him know that, like, if he was up with Father and doing appointments with the people late, if you just went to bed and didn't stay up and show that you wanted to see him, then those were little things that he watched for. And I will say, when I moved in with the other lady, the first time two ladies moved together, she helped me in that way a lot. So I guess that's how it started to change for me a little bit. And in his words, I started to get close. So then it changed to where he was having the ladies live with me, and I tried to be understanding. I remember one lady in particular coming to me and having that same feeling. She's like, I don't know what to do. How do I get close? And so I privately went to him and I said, hey, she's wondering about this. And he was like, thank you for telling me. And the next thing I knew, she got to go on a ride with him and got a little bit of time alone with him and stuff. So I know that I wasn't the only one that struggled in that area where you didn't quite know how to open up, I guess. And I think husband and wife, people that understand a true relationship, you can understand what I'm saying, that it just wasn't there between some of us. And we just became more of the helpers in the family.
It's just so unfortunate because you have, well, there's so many things about that that's unfortunate, but you have your assignment. Like you were assigned to him and got married to him. So it's not like you can go say, hey, I want to get married to someone that loves me. you know, you can't.
No, I would have never thought of that.
Right.
Absolutely. It was just submit. At least for me, that was my feelings. Other ladies that had feelings, and maybe there were other ladies that got a little sassy with him. I'm sure there were, because we were ladies from all different walks of life and different characters. But for me, that's just kind of how I was.
I can't imagine just splitting that much time between that many people anyway.
Right.
Like,
you kept having more and more wives.
Yeah. So it's like even just having to share that much time in between that many wives seems like it would be impossible from the get-go to even be able to give.
Within the year I got married, he got 10 ladies in 1 year, and then he didn't get any ladies for a year before he got some more ladies. And it felt like that time after the 10 ladies had been married, it was kind of a time of, now we can get to know each other. And that was when things got a little bit better, I would say, in an intimate relationship for me and him. But
Sorry, can I ask one more question? Because we've had different people tell us different things, so I was just curious, within the Jeffs family, a lot of people have said that, like, once a woman gets pregnant within the FLDS, that, like, the husbands aren't allowed to be intimate with them anymore, and that they're not allowed to have any type of relations. Was that the same within the Jeffs family? Warren was?
I know that was what it was taught. I've heard some of my older siblings, my brothers that were like a part of priesthood meeting, he said, like, Reuland Jeffs taught that. I guess some of the men were coming to him and saying, you know, what should I do if the women want to be together, I guess they were pregnant. And so Reuland Jeffs kind of set that rule that it was, you stayed away from, or didn't have intimate relations with your wife when she was pregnant. I had asked one of the ladies that had children, I can't say that for me because I never had any children with Warren personally. I did ask one of his other ladies if that was the case with him and what she had experienced, and she said that yes, he did have intimate relations with his ladies.
Wow.
I say that carefully because maybe it was only a couple of them. Maybe,
Right. Who knows?
that doesn't. People don't need to jump to that and say he was doing that with every single lady.
Yeah, it could have been a specific.
It could have just been.
I was just curious if that was something that was different per family. I've heard some families say that like they called that the murdering of unborn babies was having intimate relations while they were pregnant. Things like that. And so I was just curious if that was
I didn't
that's why I
hear
brought it up.
like that about until later in his administration or rule and reign, whatever you want to call it, when he started kicking everybody out for that sin. And I can't pinpoint the remembrance of a certain revelation that said, if you did this, this is what it is. But I just knew that that's what some people were being accused of, was it because you had sex when your wife was pregnant.
Was this before he went to prison that you first heard about it, or was he in prison at this time?
No, this was clear back after he. What you mean, the principal or what?
Yes, because living in the FLDS, growing up out there, I left after Warren was already in prison, and the whole time I was there, I never heard anything about killing unborn babies. It was later that I heard.
It wasn't during the Short Creek time before he left to go to Texas and all that stuff. I didn't hear about that stuff until...
I wonder if that was suddenly a new rule because he was in prison and he couldn't have any.
Maybe so.
If that makes sense. It seemed like a lot of new rules were popping up out of nowhere as soon as he was in prison.
Well, but the original rule came from Rulin. So
it came from Rulin.
Originally.
Yes. Yeah, I did have an older sibling tell me that he remembers that being taught in priesthood meeting.
I see. Okay.
So...
Interesting.
Some of the happy times, I guess I did kind of explain, like the children had toys, we had fun, I remember taking the children to the zoo and seeing the animals there.
The FMJ Zoo? Yes.
Yeah.
That was a big part of my childhood, too.
Oh, okay. So a big part of my experience was after I got married, then I was an assistant second grade teacher. I was the assistant to the second grade class for 1 year. And then I became the teacher the next year. So I would have been 18 or 19 when I became the teacher. I did not have a college degree. I did skip that I did finally get a diploma.
Oh.
Even though I hadn't finished all my classes, that was another little experience I had with his, kind of with his family and his daughter. Like, I got to sleep over to their house with his daughter, and the next day he called both of us up to Uncle Rulin's office. And Uncle Rulin had a diploma for her and I, his daughter and I.
Oh.
And we got it personally handed to us by Rulin Jeffs.
Was that a legal document? Like
No,
official?
it said Alta Academy on it. But I will say that I learned from a sibling. He left the church a long time before I emerged out of it. But he had a friend that had graduated from Alta Academy back in the days. And when he went to go to college, he was able to look up the college professor or somebody helped him look into that, and your diploma from Alta Academy was legit.
Oh.
You could use that to be able to say you had graduated high school to go to college.
Oh, good.
So you
That's
wouldn't
good to
have to
know.
get a GED. But I don't think very many people used that or had to use it, but this particular person did.
Oh, good.
So anyway, but I did not go to any college classes on how to teach second grade. I had 1 year watching this lady, and she was one of Uncle Rulin's ladies, and just kind of learned the ropes of how she did second grade. And then I started teaching second grade that year, and I taught it for about 14 years in the church.
Wow. And this was in Warren Jeff's home that you were teaching? Was it like a homeschool?
Yeah, well, this was the Little Jeff's Academy. By
Okay.
this time, it had expanded. Also, the Phelps Elementary School that had been my elementary public school, the public school stuff stopped. I can't remember what year that was, but now that was turned into kind of like a miniature Alta Academy, but it was called Jeff's Academy. And Warren tried to do the morning classes, but wasn't always able to attend because he was helping his father all the time. And so his brother, another one of Ruth and Jeff's sons, did the morning classes. So kind of the school started back up again. But there was that one, and then there was another smaller one right on his property, the Jeff's property. And there was a few select families that came to that, mostly kind of relatives of Warren, of Jeff's.
Okay.
There were some Jeffs and Allreds, and anyway. So I was the second grade teacher there. My classes ranged from anywhere from 7 kids to, I guess my whole span of teaching, 7 kids to 15 kids at a time. And I just had to jump into it and do the best I could, learn as I went. I loved it though. I do remember when I was younger, I always wanted to be a nurse like my sister or a teacher. And so I did get to have that fulfillment.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And it was important to Warren back then, education was. And he was very strict about being at school and being on time. But that, for me, like in my personal relationship with him, that was another thing that kind of pulled me away. Was I remember thinking the ladies that didn't have to teach school got more time with him because he would come home from meeting with Father, and sometimes he'd be there at lunch, but then we'd all have to go to school-age children and teachers, and then the ladies that didn't got to be home with him, and sometimes he was home for a few hours before he would always go back up in the afternoon and be with Father Rulin again.
You said Father Rulin. I want to clarify for any viewers that are wondering, you've mentioned he was with Father, and you're referring to Rulin Jeff, his father.
I'm sorry, because after I married him and was in his family, we just referred to him as Father or Father Rulin. Okay. Meaning Warren's father.
I see.
So anyway, I loved it. Have really good memories of the children. As I've come out, I've been able to reconnect with some of my students on Facebook.
Oh, really?
And say, hey, my second grade are all grown up. And a lot of them will say, you were one of my favorite teachers. And that made me feel really good.
Yeah.
I really loved that. I did write a question down here that many people may wonder, how did I survive and feel loved through all that? For me, it was like I tried to always be at my duty, be where he asked me to be, and I would say my prayers. Like if I got to a point where I was about to go crazy, if I didn't get a moment with him, it seemed to always something would come up. And I think a lot of this was wives telling on each other. So we would sense that somebody else needed some time with him and needed a break from what they were doing. So they would go, Warren, you haven't taken her on the drive for a long time, or she hasn't done anything with you for a long time. So we kind of helped each other secretly behind the scenes to get a turn. And I guess for me, and sometimes it's kind of silly now to think about, but like sometimes I felt like he was so inspired to know when I needed something. But honestly, I think that may have happened 1 or 2 times, but it was the other ladies telling on me. Amy's about to go crazy and she needs a break.
Wives inspire their husbands all the time for things that they need to get done.
Very true. But hey, I mean, at least it seems like, because in polygamy, a lot of people have the question, do the wives hate each other? Do they fight? It seems like maybe it's because of the lack of attention you were all getting that you could relate to each other. But it seems like you kind of had each other's backs and wanted to help each other.
Right. Yeah. And he taught us all the time to be as happy that somebody else gets blessed as when you're blessed. So still the training and the indoctrination came after I was married, and like I've stated before, me trying to be so sweet and obedient and do whatever I said, whatever he said, then I was trying to apply these things. I do remember one time, like I didn't even realize, and I think now I was having an anxiety attack, but I got put on a group of children one day, and I just didn't really want to do it, but we had gone to Monday morning meeting or Saturday work project, whatever it was, we came back, and they were older children, so I told them to go down to their room, and in a minute I'd come get them, and we were going to go do some work together. But inside, I was having an anxiety attack. I really didn't want to do it. But I went out on the deck, and I just suppressed those feelings and sat there and told myself, do what you're told to do. Just obey, just be sweet. Everything's going to be okay. My phone rang while I was out on the deck trying to work with myself, and it was him, and because my room was within distance of the deck. And I answered it, and he said, "Hi, I heard you were sick today." And then that kind of made me upset, because that was another lady telling on me, saying that I was sick because I wasn't down with the group of children, but really I was just working with myself. And I just said, "I'm not sick. I will do these children today." And he said, "Thank you." And those little moments, it got to where the little moments of appreciation where he knew he could count on me to be sweet. That was what carried me through all the time. And I guess I preferred that over being a woman that could kind of throw a little fit.
Yeah.
I remember one time witnessing, I was walking up the path with him, and one of the ladies had ran out to the cornfield. There was a huge garden of corn, because she was probably having an anxiety attack as well. And this is kind of sad to me now to think, now that I know more about mental health and stuff, but I remember thinking, boy, I'm glad I don't react like that and, throw a fit or whatever. So definitely, now I know more, like I say, about mental health. You definitely had to work with your feelings, and everybody's different, so everybody's stories and experiences are different.
Yeah. Was there ever a moment where you considered just leaving it all? Just, I'm done with this. I can't handle this. I don't want this anymore.
No, not at that time.
Okay. You were just trying to be in a good place because God was watching all, right?
Yeah,
I assume you thought.
It was the celestial law, so this is what you had to live to enter the celestial kingdom, and the highest degree of the celestial kingdom.
Right.
And in my mind, I felt like Warren was one of a man that was going to go to the highest degree of glory in the celestial kingdom.
Yeah.
So Sundays back then we would go to the meeting house, and the Jeffs had their Sunday school there. Sacrament was usually given in Sunday schools. That was more like at 10 o'clock in the morning, I think, or 9 o'clock. Usually a couple hours. The children would get up and when we would do those story and songs, they would learn a part to do in Sunday school, is usually what it was for. So the children would get up and do a song or a memorization or whatever it was in Sunday school. And we had the sacrament.
I have a question about the sacrament, because that's interesting that you guys did it in the meeting house. We just did it in our homes before the general meeting that was at 2 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken, in the afternoon. So when you did sacrament and all that with the big family, did you share 1 cup of water? Okay, so you had to deal with that too.
Yeah, the plate of bread was passed, and you just picked your piece of bread, and then 1 cup was passed, and you passed it back to the person, and they'd hand it to the next one, and if it got empty, then they'd fill it up.
Yeah. I just remember watching that cup like a hawk. Just as some of the people before me would drink it, I would try to sit on the front row for Sunday school every Sunday for that one reason, to be able to get the cup of water first, because I'd watch people, and some little kids with runny noses, and I'm like, oh. I'm like, please be blessed. Please be blessed. So that's interesting. I wonder why we shared a cup like that, if there was any significance to it.
Trying to save a million cups every Sunday.
That's probably what it was.
We had the little tiny paper ones.
Yeah,
and then
in
when
the
kids,
mainstream.
In the
LDS,
mainstream.
yeah.
And then when the kids would drink, or you'd let them because they wanted to, at a really young age, 3, you're like, okay, you can have the cup, and then you'd let them keep the cup so they could play with it to be entertained through the rest of sacrament meetings. You didn't have to give them a little toy in sacrament meeting.
We didn't go to the LSJ meeting house at first. That happened I think at first, like, we did Sunday schools just at his house. And
Okay.
then at one point, Father Ruland's sons, all of his sons, were coming to the Sunday school, and it was too big. And then also at one point, my stepdaddy's family and that prominent family and everybody that was kind of connected to them came to the Sunday school.
Okay.
I don't know
That's
how
not
that
s-
all came about
yeah.
or the reason, but
I'm
not
not
that big.
surprised because your stepdad and his family seem to be really close with the Jeffs family. From what I can remember seeing from the outside, it seemed like there were a lot of really close connections and they did a lot together. So I'm not surprised by that.
yeah. And also remember they are blood related.
And they're blood related too, yes.
So-
True.
Okay, so we've come to the point now when Father Ruland passed away. So this is kind of vague in my mind now. I don't remember a lot of details except for Father Ruland had gone on a drive that day and something went wrong in his health. I don't want to say exactly what happened now because it's been so long. I can't remember. Something with his colon or, issues in his stomach, abdomen. When they got back, the doctor in the town had come up and they were watching him. Warren truly believed that, this is what I perceived of him. He truly believed that his father would never die.
That's what we've heard.
He had the same experience when Uncle Roy died. Uncle Ruland felt that same about Uncle Roy. He thought Uncle Roy would never die. And so what I observed when this all happened was that it was very traumatic for him. He didn't expect that Father Ruland would die. But it got so close that he said, "Let's go now." And they loaded Uncle Ruland up and headed down to the hospital. We were informed through phone calls here and there how things were going over the intercom, and it was just pretty sober. Again, I was just sticking to my duty with the children all the time.
And this was in 2002, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So
he was in the hospital, and now I've wanted someone like yourself to collaborate with because my memory, it seems like we were in Sunday meeting when Warren Jeffs was presiding, and the phone call came in that Ruland Jeffs had passed away, and so he took a phone call. It seemed like the silence spread over the congregation, like, I don't know, it was just dead silent, and a couple of the people, including Warren Jeffs, stood up and kind of jetted out of the building because it had happened. He had passed away. Is that? Am I not remembering
I'm trying
that?
to remember if Warren was at meeting or if he had stayed with his father.
Okay. Yeah.
I may be getting two stories mixed up because I do remember him. No, that was when his first wife had her last child and was having complications. She was in the hospital and he had to leave her to be where his father wanted to be and go to a meeting.
Sheesh.
So that was that experience, and he was able to make it back. But she ended up being okay. Let me digress here for a minute. That was another thing that I had the opportunity of doing. He called on me a lot to, like, I watched two children be born. He would let the ladies see sometimes a sister wife have a child, so you got to witness that. He had me go down to the hospital a couple times with some of the ladies that had miscarriages. And then I wanted to point this out because I listened to on somebody's channel, and it was spoken by somebody that didn't really know our people, that we didn't care about caring for the special needs children or ones that had disabilities. And that kind of fired me up because what I experienced, that's not the truth. Warren himself, one of his ladies had a child that was born without one leg. And when they went down to have the baby in the hospital, then the doctor came out and mentioned abortion to take the baby's life, and Warren got so mad and said, absolutely not. this child will live, and he will be born. And so, but before she even had the baby, the midwife had done the ultrasound, I guess, and found out that it didn't have a leg. And he privately told me and a couple other ladies first. But why he did that was because he said, when she finds out, I want you to be there to be a strength to her and help her if she's, having an emotional time or anything. And then when she has the baby, be there to help out. Sorry, that's kind of off the topic that I got to.
No, it's good to know
that's good to point out. Yeah.
That he wasn't, that there wasn't anything against children who were going to need special help or anything like that.
And then he also, when another one of his children that were born had a hair lip, then he gathered all his children and said, she is so special, and did not want any of the children to make fun of her or make her think that she was different or anything. And that was very prominent, and that she be treated right.
That's good.
I'm glad you point this out, because in my experience, and I've mentioned this before, it seemed like those with any kind of special needs were very well taken care of, because my father's first wife dealt a lot with that. And she would make sure that there was a place for the community to bring their children, and there was the special teaching curriculums and things, or whatever was needed to help those that were in that position. So I saw a different side of it. But yes, I have heard, like you said, other people say, "Oh no, they didn't care about those people, and they tried to put them to exile or something like that."
Yeah. So what I witnessed, that was not the truth. So,
as far as miscarriages went, at least within Warren's family, or in your experience, was that something that was blamed on the women? Because we've heard different families have different experiences, or that like Warren sent women away later on for miscarriages.
I want to say that is different for different people's experiences. Okay. Because I do know of some of his ladies that had miscarriages. And then when all that started coming out in the corrections, I remember specifically one revelation that he said to his ladies that none of his ladies were guilty of that. But if he's sending away another lady because she had a miscarriage, and some of his ladies did. But at that was at the beginning of when all that happened. Obviously, later all of his ladies were sent away at one point. So whether that was their specific reason told to them, I don't know. That's, not my story. But we were trying to decide if Warren was in the meeting. What I remembered, and maybe some people can comment in your comment section what really happened, but I thought Warren was down with Uncle Rulon, and Uncle Fred was taking charge of meeting, and the call was made to Uncle Fred.
And you know what? That's
that he had passed away.
That's a possibility, and maybe it was just announced at that moment, and then Uncle Fred was the one that left to be with him. That's possible. Maybe I just remember being in a meeting when I heard the news.
Yeah, and I remember that too, because I was at home with the kids, and it was told, but we were kind of getting information before it was going public to the people.
I see.
So they would do an intercom call over our home, and by that time you could page over Uncle Rulon's home, just his home. You could page over just Warren's home, or you could page over both homes at once.
Oh, really? They were connected. I did not know that.
Yeah. Okay. He had that. That's how we listened to those night classes that Father Rulon and Warren would do.
So they were just going throughout the speakers in the house. I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, before Rulon passed away, like you said, how Warren didn't never believe that his father was ever going to die. What's your personal opinion on whether or not, if he didn't think his father was going to die, he probably never had plans to become a prophet? Did he ever mention anything of taking over for his father? Or, some people think, oh, he was planning on becoming the next prophet. And I'm like, but the more I hear from his family members, he sounded pretty sure his father wasn't going to die. So how could he plan on taking over for him?
If he had that plan all along, he did a good job of hiding it from us.
Okay.
So I'll say that because he taught this like back in school. I remember him saying, always the man that became the next prophet in our church was the most humble man. He didn't want to be the prophet. He wasn't an aspiring person, and so in my mind, it was like Warren never wanted to be the prophet because that's what he had taught us.
It's kind of what his son Ammon that we recently had on our channel said
the same
too.
thing.
He said the similar thing that you did, and it's interesting to get the perspective of those that were living in the home, because everyone on the outside that weren't living in the home seemed to have a different story. That based on what we saw, he was trying to speak for his father, and
Well, it could look like that because, like after Father Rulon quit taking appointments, Warren took over all those appointments. It wasn't a fun job. I remember Warren coming home stressed because he sat there all day and listened to the people's problems. When they couldn't get along with their wives and their husbands, it's kind of like therapy or whatever. We didn't go to those things. We went to the prophet and laid that all out on him. And that was one of the things, like why Father Rulon kind of took a back seat, so to speak, because after he had his stroke, he couldn't handle all that.
I see.
And they were trying to help him heal. And that was when Warren was more involved with the people.
I see.
But
So from your perspective, there was no like, oh, okay, I'm marrying into the future prophet.
and so then there was like, but also the family was witness to hearing Father Rulon say here and there things like, Warren's the next one. I can't remember his exact quotes, but there was little times that little things were said like that in his nighttime class, sometimes in the Sunday school over there at the meeting house. There was different little things said like that. And then a lot of people will probably remember that it happened once in church. And he asked Warren, do you agree or do you accept this calling or what? I can't remember his exact words, but I've had some people say they remember that meeting. And Warren just kept saying, thy will be done, Father, thy will be done.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I don't remember that meeting, but I do remember that it was pretty easy for most of the community to just start following Warren Jeffs. There were a couple people that had testimonies. I know one of his wives bore testimony of an experience she had. You might be able to share light on that experience, but it seemed like there were people coming out saying that they had very spiritual experiences that told them Warren was to be the next prophet.
That was after Father died. Then what I remember is Warren, it's not like Warren stood up there in church and said, ta-da, I'm the leader, everybody follow me. He was very humble and quiet about it. And he used people's testimonies like that to try to, I guess, to help people understand that, instead of him just, because he didn't want to just step up and say, I'm the leader now.
Right.
He felt uncomfortable doing that. And I felt like what I witnessed then, I thought he felt like maybe Uncle Fred should have this position. And so at that time, there was this song he had written up for Uncle Fred, and he sang it to Uncle Fred.
I remember that
telling
song.
him he was a perfect priested man.
Dear Uncle Fred, we love you is how it started. Yeah.
And that was at that time because he wanted to be respectful to Uncle Fred versus him.
It's confusing. It's so confusing because you see one side of, like, it seemed like he just wanted to take all the power, and then he made all of these changes, and it's just like this was his plan, cunning plan that he had all along. And then there's the other side where people living with him share a different story. And not only that, but in years, we'll get to this later, but in years to come, he tries to give up. And it's the people that follow him that tell him, no, you have to keep doing this. You're the prophet. Yeah. So it's so confusing how there can be so different stories.
So like I say, if he did have that thought in mind the whole time, then he did a good job of hiding it from us. That's what I saw of it. And, you know, part of that could have been my mindset at the time, because we were we so revered our husband. You know, he was your priesthood head. You know, I didn't hardly dare think anything bad of him. That's why all my personal feelings and my personal relationship with him, I just kept him down inside and didn't ever question him. Or
Wow.
so, yeah, we heard that he had passed away, and then it was just, I remember it was just very sober. I can't remember a lot of the details. I think I tried to explain to the children. By that time, I had been assigned to a certain specific group of children, because as he got more ladies, then bouncing the children around to different mothers just wasn't the best thing for them.
That makes sense.
Consistency was the key in their success. But yet they always did. We were caretakers that had them most of the day, but then they had a time that they would go be with their mother. And it was like, time to go be with mother. You know, they all looked forward to that hour or whatever it was that their mother could take care of them.
I see.
And go spend time with them. I do remember, I think it was that very evening of the death, school was about to start, and I had been trying to get the reading books ready for second grade, and Warren came out of the house and was walking up the path, and I just took the opportunity and ran out there and walked with him, but he didn't let me walk very far. He was very sober, just, you could tell his thoughts were elsewhere, and so he just said, stay down here, and he went up, and just basically he wanted everybody to just carry on as everything had been. Like, the schedule was the same, you know, having class up at Father Rulin's was the same, and he just tried to keep everything going. And I think that's what he actually got up in priesthood meeting, or not priesthood meeting, but I think it was like a Saturday morning meeting, and said, like, the program hasn't changed, we're just going to carry on. And he would say, Father's still with us. And at that time, being in that situation and mindset, I felt like he was just trying to process losing his father and taking on this huge responsibility of leading the people.
So I'm sorry if I'm skipping ahead here. I know it comes not too long after this, and you can backtrack if you would like, but what changed? That's because here he is. He's seeming to be distraught, humble. I want to just continue this community on as it's always been. And then he stands up in a Saturday morning meeting and just starts kicking all the man out of the community.
Okay.
Like that, something must have switched there.
Right.
And
So
at what point did he declare himself? Like, at what point was all of a sudden it went from him being just Warren to him being a prophet?
I feel like that, and within our own family, this is how it was. It was left for yourself to find your testimony. And I remember going to the Lord in prayer and just like saying, Lord, what do we do next? And whatever burning peace that you got, that's what you followed. And I
agree with you. And it's interesting that it was put that way. It was up to each family and each individual to pray and decide. And because I remember going home after a meeting and Father gathering up all of us children into the living room. And he said, I prayed about it. And just so you know, I'm going to follow Warren Jeffs. But you all need to have a testimony of it as well. But that's my stance. That's what I'm doing. Of course, you know, me, the young teenager,
Right.
I'm like, well, I'm
going to do it
that
my
way.
way.
Yeah, right.
And
What am I going to do?
Yeah.
I feel like that's how a lot of people, especially the younger people, did. You know, like, well, if everybody else is doing that, then I'm going to too.
Right.
But there were people that at that point that said, nope, this isn't what I'm doing, and that's where their FLDS story ends. Or some of them went up to Canada and went with Winston Blackmore and the group up there.
So, but Winston did continue to follow Warren Jeffs, I believe, right?
If I'm
For
remembering,
a time period at least.
yeah, well, and if I'm remembering right, though, he was corrected right before Father Rulin died.
Oh,
That
okay.
correction happened before Father Rulin passed away.
So he was already kind of with the dunce hat, sitting in the corner. Interesting. Okay.
Your question, what did change? For his personal family, what did change was Warren became very isolated in his room all the time after his father died. And we didn't get to see him very much. And in what was told to all of us that was we need to be quiet, peaceful, heavenly, because the heavenly powers are around Warren, teaching him what to do next. So it's like I personally felt like that Joseph Smith was visiting him, that even maybe the Savior was visiting him, that his father was visiting him. He did tell us at one point of his father visiting him. So that's what was happening shortly after, when he stopped going to the meetings and stuff. Now, in a different perspective and mindset, I look at that and I think, okay, that could have been him trying to process, okay, let's say he did have this all planned out. So he's in his room thinking all this up. Okay, now what am I going to do next? And then therefore came all his plans of the lands of refuge and moving his children and his people and hiding from the law. There's a different perspective. But the standpoint I like to take is I can't say what was going through his mind because I can't read his mind. So there's two different perspectives you can
And even if he didn't have it all planned out from the beginning, even if it was kind of thrown onto him, and now all of a sudden he's in charge and he didn't want to be, but now he is, that time in his room could have been him coming up with the plan of everything that was to follow.
Right. Yeah. That's what I've contemplated in my mind. But,
right. Wow. So interesting. So it was almost immediate that he was running from the law.
Yes. And I can't remember all the reasons. There was different experiences of him being subpoenaed. And I don't know if those first issues were with because I remember all through when Uncle Rulin's days, there was court battles. There was apostates trying to, I want to say fights over their land and wanting the UEP property that they had lived on for years. And, there was court battles through the years. So what this specific one was, or after Father Rulin died, I don't know the details of every single one, but I remember what would happen was being in his family, people were coming to the gates. So by this time that big wall was made.
Right.
And everybody was supposed to have lights off, blinds shut, go to your rooms, don't make a peep. So it sounds like nobody's here. And the officials actually came to our door and banged on the doors. And we just were in our room saying our prayers, praying for protection. Warren had poofed and was gone. So there was different times like that happened right after he became the prophet.
Interesting.
Pressures were coming down on him. He had his family almost an escape plan, where if we had to move on a moment's notice, ladies were assigned with ladies that had children to help that mother with their children. And we were actually, I think, if I remember right, we were assigned to different vehicles to jump in the vehicles and go. And I think his fear all along, as he started to run from the law, was, as a father wants to care for his family, he had those plans in place to care for his family if something was to happen to him. And he did not want anything to happen to his family. And I think he feared that. So here he teaches us not be fearful, but I think he feared that all along.
Yeah.
And it wasn't very long after his father had passed that he started taking on the wives of his father too, right?
Yes.
What did that look like? Because how many wives were there already before Rulin passed away?
I want to say there was a little over 20 wives.
Which is already so many.
When Father Rulin passed away. It was, he died in September. By October, then the first group of 7 married him. It was not all of them in one whammy. It was a little bit here and there. And what I remember is that the ladies were kind of, again, supposed to go to the Lord and get their testimony or their affirmation that this was the right next step to take. I know there's a lot of stuff said out there about him. It is not true that all of them married Warren, but only 2. I can think of at least a dozen that married other men.
Okay. I know that my sister did not marry him.
Yeah.
So there's one that I know of for sure. So,
My 3 sisters that married Uncle Rulin from my stepdaddy's family, none of them married Warren.
okay.
So I'd have to sit there and name all their names to get an exact count, but I can say at least a dozen did not marry him, or maybe up to 15 did not marry Warren.
So do you feel like it was more of their decision of whether or not they wanted to be married to him, and it was just an easier solution, or was it...
I'm just kind of going off little memories of what I remember hearing of their experiences, and I don't want to tell their experience, but it was just almost kind of like you had to go get a testimony if he was the prophet. They were supposed to pray whether he told them, you belong to me, or he said, who do you feel like you want to get married to? I don't know all those details. We did start getting the ladies from Father Rulin's family come into our family. And something interesting that comes to my head here at this time was Warren was a little bit weighed down of how all of us ladies would feel getting all these ladies. And I remember a class we had and he mentioning that, and I remember going to him personally afterwards, always, trying to be the peacemaker and the sweet one. But I went to him and said, I want you to know that, I support you 100%. If this is what the Lord wants, you getting all these, Father Rulin's ladies, and I'm not going to have bad feelings about it. I'll try to love and accept all of them as my sister wife. And he appreciated that, but I know there was, he was considerate of what our feelings would be if this was going to happen.
That's a side of the story that not many people would say. Most people would say that he planned it all along. That's why his father was marrying so many women, so that he could take them for himself later on. So that's interesting that there's another perspective that he didn't really want, or maybe he did, but he was weighed down by the feelings of his other wives, at least. That's unique.
And so it happened gradually, usually it was a group of 7 at a time, or 3 or 5, and I think that has to do kind of with the quorums. Somewhere when I was younger, I remember hearing about quorums of wives and quorums in the priesthood. 3, 5, 7, and 9 were significant numbers. For the reasoning for that, I have no idea. But I just remember that's how it was.
Yeah.
So we start getting all these new mothers, and then that was kind of a new experience because he brought them in and tried to, just like when I got married, put them on the calendar, give them a job to do. He tried some of them working with the children, but now we had both the houses. We had the South House, we called it, and the North House was Father Rulin's house. And that house was 3 houses in one.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, it was huge. It had got an addition done on it twice while Rulin Jeffs was still alive.
Yeah.
So, and then he did things like fruit basket upset, and he would move some of the Father Rulin's ladies down to the South House and some of the South House people up to the North House. And he was I want to almost say constantly doing that. And I felt my interpretation of that was how he helped us not get set in our ways. And that was how he helped us be directable to whatever he told us to do. Anyway, so it was amazing, just trying to go through those times. And during this time, I did go to him and express something, and he did what I suggested. So after the ladies started getting married, then he did start again trying to help, let them do some of the children. And I had been doing these 3 boys consistently for a while now. And every time they got to go or was on with another mother, then I'd get him back, and it's like you started all over again with all the stuff that you'd been teaching them, Oh, and also another thing that he tried after we got all those ladies was, and it was one of Father Rulin's ladies' ideas, there was this wheel we rotated from kitchen and house and, whatever. And that's when I got frustrated because the kids were passed around so much. And so I finally went to him and I said, I'm sorry, but this isn't working. I know the way you like your children taken care of and watched over, and this is just not working. And he said, okay. He said, after this, we won't do that. So at that time, it was more set. Like there was a certain mother that was on girls, certain mother on boys, big boys, little boys. By this time, what we called the big boys that were kind of young when I got married were now teenagers. They moved into getting to do jobs with their cousins, and different stuff like that. But so it was very interesting, but I loved everyone. Again, it was, like I said, I had a pretty good relationship with everybody. I'm not perfect. I didn't do everything perfect, but I enjoyed getting to know each of them. And
man, in a position and situation like that, I don't know if there is a perfect way to do it, right? I mean, that's, I mean, you say you didn't do everything perfect, but geez, that would just be hard to survive, let alone do it perfectly, right? There's a lot of movement and
a lot of people to manage.
A lot of people. I mean, I don't know if there were a lot of young kids I don't think there were any young kids that became a part of the family because Rulon didn't have any young kids, right?
No. All of Father Rulon's family that came in were just ladies. Okay.
I see. So all of the kids or children of Rulon Jeffs were adults at that point? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. Huh. And the grandmothers, like the mothers that were his mothers when he was growing up, they didn't marry him. They didn't get remarried. He took them under his care. So his mother and, the Father Rulon's ladies that had bore Father Rulon, all his children, they did not get remarried to Warren. They just became the grandmothers in the family.
That's good to know because I don't think anyone's ever clarified that for us.
Right.
Everyone's like, okay, so his moms became his wives. That's so weird. Yeah. So all the ones he considered mothers, so they moved in with you guys still though?
Or we had those two houses.
Oh, okay.
So I will point out here from the time Father Rulon died and the families merged together, Warren's family has never been back under one roof.
Oh, wow.
Just too large.
It's just too large, and then with all the moving to the lands of refuge and everything, that was when it stopped. And I think back on the timeline, and everything happened quite fast after he became the prophet. So that was 2002. So basically the next year was just trying to navigate life with this huge family. I was still teaching school, still doing children every day after school. I won't speak for everybody, but most your time with Warren or ability to see him and have personal time with him became hardly nothing. I mean, just zero. Once in a while, he would come in my room and give me a hug of appreciation and say, thank you for watching over my children. I do remember one time when one of the, I want to say grandmothers, but she was a younger one. She'd married Warren and she was working with the boys I had always one day. And at the end of the day, I had been on kitchen. And man, it was a chore to cook for that many people.
Oh, boy.
But you did have help. So anyway, it was the end of the day, and he told me to come take over the boys and go to their story and song and put them to bed. And when he told the other lady that that's what was going to happen, he said, Amy doesn't just tend my children, she teaches my children. And I kind of took pride in that. I mean, that made me feel good.
Yeah.
It made me, and that was my relationship with Warren. It was that he trusted me with his children. Mm-hmm. And at one point, he would say, I trust the ladies that I have around my children more than the ladies that I always have with me. So I guess that's another thing that helped me get through not having the love and the attention that
made you feel that he trusted you a lot
and appreciated you still.
And appreciated. I mean,
and that I was needed.
Yeah. Well, and since you were raised in the FLDS and raised in a way that it's all about being obedient, listening to your priesthood head and that kind of thing. It's not, I don't know that you had a traditional life planned for yourself, did you?
Right. Mm-mm.
So maybe it was not easy by any means, but maybe it was, you were at least able to cope with the fact that this is my duty. This is what I'm supposed to do. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to have my personal special experience with my husband and have children and everything, but this is what God wants of me. Mm-hmm. Did you just have to accept that ultimately?
Yeah. I mean, I did hold on to the hope to have children. I will say that before he became the prophet and after that experience at the beginning, I thought by the way he acted and the times we were together that we were kind of past that and that we were trying for a baby. Mm-hmm. But there was those different times that I spoke of that I would get talked to like he did, and then the rest of that story comes later in my experience. So, okay. But yeah, I just accepted it how it was. I tried to be happy, and I tried to spread a lot of cheer around all the time. I was a happy, cheery person, and tried to make everybody smile. And anyway, so.
Wow. Well, good for you to be able to just switch your mindset and be, you know what, I'm going to be happy. I'm going to be grateful for what I have. You know, that's kudos to you. That would be hard. That would be really hard.
Yeah. And there was many other ladies that succeeded in that as well. But I feel like there was also a lot of ladies that suffered a lot because not everybody's the same. Everybody has different characters.
Right.
And so when I look back on things, I mean, if they're still in and you were to ask them, were you happy? Then they're going to say, I was so happy. There's only happiness in the celestial law. But once you experience something different and look back on it, yes, there was happy times, but now I can see what I was going through in a different light.
Right.
So
you were just in survival mode, right? Or at least I feel like a lot of people we talk to, you put yourself in the survival mode and you convince yourself that this is good. This is, this is a good life. Yeah. I mean, it's not until you're out of that survival mode that you can even begin to see what you were missing out on. Right. Even in my life, I see some of that, and it's nothing like what you experienced and what Ammon experienced, Warren's son, and things that other people that we've had on our show talking about their experiences. I feel like I was very lucky. But even then, once I moved away from it all, looking back, I can realize, life can be so different and so much better in certain aspects. Mm-hmm. So
absolutely. The next big event that happened was, and this had only been a year after he became the prophet, then he removed his young children from the property there in Short Creek. And this was the first... I won't say the first because there was a little bit here and there of people leaving to go to the lands of refuge, is what they were called. We first were removed to R1, which was in Colorado. Mm-hmm. Everybody had just been carrying on, doing their thing, their duties. Like I said, I was doing children teaching school. But then we started to notice that something was going on. Warren would come out of his room and sometimes go places and be gone for a number of days or maybe a week at a time. I will point out also, though, there were a few times that we took a family camping trip at this time. He would do little trips, like I remember going to the Hoover Dam with the children and him. He kind of continued that going on a drive thing, but it wasn't every single day. It was just here and there. So there were some times of fun and recreation, and there was always basketball games out on the court. The children still had toys up to at that point.
I see.
And so there was still somewhat of a regular lifestyle during that year, but we just didn't see Warren near as much as we had.
I see. Do you know what R1 stands for that's in Colorado?
refuge one.
So it's okay.
The
So
R stands for refuge. And
Okay.
then why the numbers are what they are, I don't know.
I see.
I don't
Okay.
have any reason. I think it was, and they used that code when they would talk on, I mean, they used that on the phones and stuff to be secretive, so that if somebody was tracking the phone, then they wouldn't know the location. So you're
see.
not saying I'm in Colorado or I'm in Texas. You're saying I'm at R1 or R17.
Okay.
Okay.
Wow.
So we had been seeing a couple ladies, and here and there just vamoose. All of a sudden they were gone. So in our minds we're like, okay, something is going on. Something new is happening. And continually in my mind it was like, this is the next step toward the redemption of Zion. That's what his sermons started being a lot about, I guess, preparing for the redemption of Zion. Yeah, ladies started leaving. We knew something was going on. And then the day that a big group of the children left, we had our good words that morning. And he said, I'm going to a prayer meeting today to deliver a revelation of the Lord. Okay, and revelation started being given. You know, he started talking in the name, you know, as though Heavenly Father was talking. So that was another thing that was different. For me personally, I had an experience of reading in the history of the church some story about something similar. I guess when somebody described when Joseph Smith was writing the Book of Mormon and the feelings they got. And so I felt like I had this confirmation that these revelations were legit, you know, that they were truly from Heavenly Father.
Warren does a good job of sounding very scriptorial, I guess.
Right.
Like the way that his revelations are spoken sound like the Book of Mormon. They sound like Doctrine and Covenants. And it's like, it's kind of, I always find it interesting, even in the Doctrine and Covenants, you know, okay, I get why ancient scripture sounds different because that was that in that time. And then like, in modern days, I was told that, you know, think times have changed and that's why different doctrines are now than what they used to be in the Bible or used to be in the Book of Mormon. And yet all of the new scripture still sounds the same. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't they like change the wording to sound modern for us in this modern day? If like all these other doctrines have changed because times change over
Right.
time and God, you know, God doesn't change, but the way that he takes care of his people changes. And I'm like, well, it'd be great if God changed his language to sound more understandable. But he doesn't, apparently. Sorry, tangent. But he doesn't.
That's okay.
Warren just does a good job
Yeah,
of sounding that way.
he
So I'm not
does.
surprised. I feel like they almost do that to try to make it, you feel those same spiritual confirmations that you feel in all these other books of scripture that you've been reading your whole life. Feel good in that way. And then when prophets or, you know, leaders of churches sound that way as well, it's easy for your heart to just instantly feel that kind of comfort of, oh, it must be the same
must be
way.
so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was going to go that morning, and this is the first major correction I remember after he became the prophet. It wasn't the 4 men that everybody talk about. It was another man that had been almost like his adopted brother and had worked really close with him up in Alta Academy, Ron Robach.
Oh, yes.
So he was going that morning to reveal to the people that he was being handled, is the kind of the word that was used, meaning he would lose priesthood and lose his family and not have those, and not be a man that could be trusted to, you know, he wasn't a man anymore that you could take his word as, you know,
I remember
as a good
that.
priesthood man, or however you want to say
Yes,
that.
I remember that.
So he was going to go do that morning, and he told us all, I need your prayers, you know. So I took the boys I was doing, we went down in my bedroom, and I sat them down on the couch, and we taught the children to sit quiet through the trainings as the best to their age level ability. If they were super small, we'd have them do it for 10 or 15 minutes, just to learn to respect when priesthood authority was talking, and to prepare them to be able to get to go to meeting when they got older. So I did that, and then the meeting happened, and the revelation was read. Oh, and before it, also in that morning, he said, I'm going to be meeting with people today. I will decide who I meet with. So don't come up to the big house. There became this habit after he became the prophet, because we didn't get to see him very much, that whenever he was up at the big house doing appointments or anything, it was common for his family to run up there and see if we could get a glimpse of him coming out, or if you could grab him and ask him a question then, or when he was walking down the path. So he had told us, don't come up there. And I thought to myself, maybe I'm going to be one of the people that he talks to today. And I thought, I'm just little old me, being with the children. So later that day, I had kind of, obviously I'd figured out that things were happening. One of the ladies that I worked really close with the children, I had a feeling that she was going to go. And I got to thinking, well, I'm going to be left here with all the children. But so around 2:00 in the afternoon, then I get a phone call and get told to come up to his office and to go get this particular lady as well. She already knew that she was going to go, but I didn't. But I was called first and told to go get her. So, and we were supposed to be really secretive and not be seen, but come up to the north house, the big house. So we went out the gate and went up the street. And then the gates were opening just as we got up there, because now I remember that it was people that had been trained to go to Texas or go to the land of refuge. And they were leaving from their training, but they were not people in our family. Oh. So he was beginning to train other men and their families to come on this mission. Mm-hmm. But we got up there, and there was a few other ladies there, and I remember feeling like it was supposed to be so secretive that I wondered why they were there and wondered if I was in the wrong spot. But turned out after a little minute, he called 5 ladies in. 2 of us were ladies that had been doing the children quite a bit. The other 3 ladies hadn't been with the children so much. So I don't remember everything word for word, but basically gave us a training, when I say training, that's just kind of like a sermon or a lesson, that this is the next step that we needed. It was a greater step the Lord was having happen. It was a privilege to be called, and it was the redemption of Zion. It was always called the Redemption of Zion mission. Right. And so I had been teaching the stories of the prophet Joseph Smith and that history to my second graders for so many years. And honestly, I remember looking back on what he did, and it was a repeat in history. Like, he kind of just did the very same thing that Joseph Smith did. Mm-hmm. And so we're sitting here getting this training, and I'm thinking, well, what's going to happen who's going to take care of the children? It didn't even cross my mind that the children were going to come. And after a few minutes, then he said, and 16 children will be coming with us. Wow. And my mouth just went, boom. And then I thought, I'm going to be taking care of all the children. Yep. No, and this other lady that came with me, she is wonderful. We had become very good friends, always had each other's back. If she was sick and needed someone to do the kids, I did them. If I was sick, or if she got to go do something with him, then I'd take her kids. That happened a lot in our family. There was, you just had each other's back kind of that way.
And this was in preparation to go to Colorado or Texas?
Colorado first.
We
first went to Colorado.
I see.
So then I'm thinking in my mind, I'm going to be with the children. And in my mind, I pictured this one-story house out in the desert with a flat roof. I don't know why, but that's what came to my mind. And I was like, okay, whatever, So we get this training, and then he said, and then he tells us only people that are called by revelation can come. Mm-hmm. And the Lord has named your name, but he has not named any of the mothers' names of the children to come.
Oh, man.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, whoa, because I knew that was going to be a big blow. And I wondered how he was going to pull that off.
So obviously at this point, we don't believe that he was getting revelation of who was going anywhere. Me personally, speaking for myself here.
Mm-hmm.
What is the purpose of separating children from their mothers?
He kept telling the family that a big test was coming. You remember Heber C. Kimball's quote, a test is coming. And that's the way he put it. And it was the way I looked at it back then was, this is an important quote to bring up. I wanted to remember this. Joseph Smith said, "If a religion does not require the sacrifice of all earthly things, it is no religion at all." Mm-hmm. And so that was big, at least for me in my mind. So here he's requiring a big sacrifice of his ladies. And he started with his family first. And that was everything about the mission was me and my family go through it first. And then it was required somewhat here and there of the other families when they were called. I won't say all of them, but some of them. So we got sent down, and he said the mothers are now going to come up and receive word. So I went down the path and gathered up. I had left the boys with their mothers while I was up there. Gathered up the boys, and then they went up there and received their message. It's obvious. Oh, and he also told us that they weren't going to know what ladies were going until they brought the children to him.
I see.
So keep in mind, this happened at 2:00 in the afternoon, and we were supposed to leave that night at 8.
Oh my word.
And he told us, pack your stuff, you're never coming back, is also what he told us.
Wow.
So I had that amount of time to pack my personal belongings and the children's, because he said the mothers aren't going to find out for a little bit, so you can start. If you can start doing the children's, then do so. But the mothers were going to come pack their own children's stuff.
Yeah.
So, and he gave the mothers even less time to say goodbye to their children.
Yeah. So he told them we were only up there for maybe 45 minutes, and then they came right up. So they found out right after us. I came back down, and I realized that some of the ladies with some children had already left the property. And I didn't understand why or where or what, but some of the ladies that had nursing babies still, he did not remove them from their mother at that time.
So nursing babies were allowed to stay?
With their mother, yes.
Okay.
The youngest that we took William was 2, and then there was one younger than him. I want to say she was almost 2. She wasn't quite 2.
2-year-olds? Mm-hmm. I would die as a mother having my 2-year-old taken away from me.
Mm-hmm. And so I went down, gathered up the boys. The mothers went up, received their word. I came back down and went down to my room and tried to start packing. I told the boys, their room was just across the hall from mine, and I said, go in there and play with your toys. And I was trying to get ready. And also another thing to point out that happened this day was his second wife that had cancer. She found out that day, had been in with the doctors, and was basically given X amount of years to live that day. Yeah. And then this was being required of her as well.
We just heard about that story from Ammon, because that is Ammon's mom,
yes.
Her mother that had cancer.
And God love her. I love that woman. I'm so sorry for what she had to go through. And it hurts me to think now that I was a part of it. Like, I went with the children, and I'm like, why didn't I stop and say something? We were so brainwashed to just do whatever we were told to do. But anyway, so he called me, and Warren did after he told the ladies, and he said, Barbara's going through a lot. I want you to help her do whatever you need to do for her. And I said, okay. But we were supposed to be being so secret about all of this. So I went back down to my room and was trying to pack up. And all of a sudden Barbara came, and she just came into my room. And I had boxes around, and I had my laundry out all on the floor. And I thought I was supposed to keep it quiet. You know, I was like, I didn't know if I was supposed to let her in, but she just came in. And then I thought, well, he did. He told me to help her. And she sat down and put her head in her hands, and she said, I'm sorry. She was crying, and she said, I've had the doctors all day tell me that I'm going to die, and now I'm having this happen to me. And I didn't realize at that point that her oldest son, Warren's oldest son in the family, but it was Barbara's son, was going to go too. And he was a great strength to his mother, and he was a really sweet, obedient boy. So he was, I want to say he was, I don't know, maybe 13 to 15 at the time. So, and the thing with the children was, it was all the children that had not been baptized yet that were coming. So I felt like there was maybe something about they were innocent so they could come to Zion, you know. But there were one or two of the children that, and one of his children did get baptized that day, but she came with us. One child that wasn't baptized, only one child that wasn't baptized didn't come on that first group of children. So I hugged Barbara. I put my arm around her and I said, I'm so sorry. And then she said, I wondered if I could do her son's laundry. And then it clicked to me that he was coming. Because I kept trying to figure out the 16 children, and some of the numbers were mixed up. But it was because one of the ones that hadn't been baptized were staying. And anyway, all this. And so then when I realized that her son, which was he was a great strength to her, was leaving too, it just, all the more I was just like, oh gosh. And
I'm sorry, she asked if she could help do his laundry?
She asked me to help her to do his laundry because she was supposed to go upstairs and pack all her little ones. She had two children that were, was it 2 or 3? No, it was 3 that were going with, and then her oldest son was going.
Were they given any type of timeline, these other mothers? Like, your children are going now, but, you know, you'll be with them in a short time. Was there any type of hope given, or was it just...
As far as I know, he may have done that to some individuals, but as far as I know, it was more like you have to qualify and be called by revelation as well. Nobody can go unless they're called by revelation. And so I do know that he did have enough respect to go over all of this with his first wife before he told anybody. I thought she didn't know because he had told us the ladies didn't know, but finding out years later when we went over this story, me and the other lady that was always on the children that went, we sat down with the children, the boys, 10 years later and reiterated the story.
Wow.
And that's how I was able to refresh my memory of all this. So, yes, to answer your question, for most of them, I think it was just you have to qualify and be called by revelation to come. So here he had all the children go outside and play with him on the lawn while we were trying to get everything ready. He had told us that the Lord wanted him off the property by 8 o'clock. And if we weren't off that property by that time, then the evil powers or the government were going to come take his children. And so that also is what was told to the mothers. So you can imagine their feelings. Of course, everybody's wanting to move forward with what's going on. We don't want to be left behind. We want to be with Father. The children want to be with Father. The ladies want to be with their husband. So, gosh, I think about them, and these are the only things I think that it was probably more of a fear and a yearning to be a part of all this that helped them let their children go.
Right. And that's just the side of the mothers. I mean, what that does to a young child, being torn apart from
Absolutely.
their mothers. That's
some of them are getting older now and coming out, and one of the boys, particularly that I took care of all the time, like I've read his story. He actually has a blog that he started. He's now left. And Shout out to Jaden Jeffs. Hey, Jaden.
Right, yeah.
I would encourage y'all to search him out on social media and check out what he's doing.
We can find him by name.
Jaden Jeffs.
Okay.
And he tells the story in a little kid's mind, like what he was going through when this happened. And it was amazing to me to read that and experience that in his little, I think he was 4 years old when it happened. Mm-hmm. We were putting boxes out in the hall, and his helpers, his brothers and different related helpers that were picking up our stuff and taking it up to the North House. That's where trailers were loaded. It comes prayer time, and everybody gathers up to the family room for prayer. And I can't begin to describe the feelings. We were singing a song together and looking around the room, and just like, your life is about to change drastically. When am I ever going to see these ladies and the rest of the children again? It was very just heart-wrenching and amazing. But yet there was also an excited feeling that you were a part of what was going on, what was happening.
Yeah.
So after prayer, he had all the children go to their own mother's rooms, because he specifically wanted the birth mothers to hand the children to him. I guess that was some kind of sacrifice that he required. So I sat in my room for a little bit and kind of watched the mothers walk up the path with the children. Then I walked up. There was, a little bit of hustling here and there, trying to get the last of things, little William's crib. And anyway, when I got up there, then the children were running up and down the ramp to the trailer, and they had no idea. I don't really remember, trying to sit down and explain to the boys what was happening, or the children. I don't know if what their mothers did. Mm-hmm. They would have had to, because they probably said, "You're going with Father," but I don't know exactly, if they told their children before that they weren't coming or whatever. But so we get up to the big house, and this is all kind of a hustle bustle, and it was getting closer to 8 o'clock. So we load in, and all the girls were in a van with a few of the ladies. Me and that particular other lady that I had done children with for so many years, we were with the boys in an excursion. And so his first wife's youngest child, he was just 2. Warren had given him to another one of the ladies, which she had been married to Uncle Rulin first. So she hadn't been around the children as long in the family. And this little boy was crying. He was sad. He didn't feel comfortable. And I remember watching it through the window. I was already in the car with the children, with the 3 boys that I did all the time. And then I heard his first wife say, "Warren, can he please be with Amy? He knows Amy." And so Warren picked him up and brought him over to the car, and he put him on my lap, and he said, "Amy, he's your boy." And I said, "Okay." And I think the only other thing that strengthened the ladies to do that was to know that there comes a confidence between each other when you know that you can hand your child over to somebody, and that person's going to love and care for them as much as they can, like you would. Mm-hmm. And I pray to God that I feel like that's how they felt about me, and this other lady specifically also, because we had been around the children a lot. But people will ask, how could a mother do that? Well, in plurality, that is one way you can do that, when you have that explicit confidence with. And I don't know, none of these ladies wanted to do this and were happy about it, but because this was what was being required of them, then they were able to do it. Yeah. And then I remember one of the other ladies coming up to the side of the door. I can still see the look on her face. And she came over just to hold her little boy's hand for as long as she could. And she looked up at me and she said, "I love you, sis." And I said, "I love you." Warren, there was a lot of crying, and Warren said, "Smile, ladies, let them see you smile." And he had his mother come and witness it all. So the grandmother of all these children sat there and watched them be taken from their mothers. But it got closer to 8 o'clock, and it was time to go, and he was getting a little just anxious. "We got to get out, we got to go, it's 8 o'clock. And so it had just stopped all of a sudden. We were kind of waiting for, everything to be packed and stuff. So we drove out that night at 8 o'clock. We had no idea where we were going. We just knew that we were going to Zion.